Cornell is finally back for NCAA wrestling, and the fans are super psyched. But do they deserve to be number one in the year conference? Also, I'm going to be talking about bold predictions I have for the Cornell team this year. So let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to the Fanco Wrestling Show this week. And the Cornell is back. Cornell is back in the NCAA, and I know there's been so much crazy talk, so much crazy excitement about the team coming back, with Yanni back, with Vito back, and we have a lot to get to on tonight's show. We'll be talking about the bout in the ballpark. That event just came out, in news and all that came out about the event. I'm going to be talking about that, as well as Cornell deserving of being number one ranked in their conference. I rank them as number one in the EIWA, and I'm going to tell you why, and also give you reasons why maybe they shouldn't be number one. I'm also going to be talking about bold predictions for Cornell, overrated and underrated college wrestling teams, and then the Iowa Hawkeye storylines to follow this season. So we have quite a bit to get to, but first I get to talk to you about Cornell. Did you know that I actually almost went to Cornell? That's true. I did. Back whenever I was in high school, and I was looking at schools to go to. I was between, and this is like early stages, right? This is my sophomore, junior year of high school. I'm thinking, well, I like Penn State, and obviously that's where I ended up going. I also kind of like Cornell, and I went on a trip there. I visited campus, toured around, thought it was a beautiful campus. But I also had, that was pretty much it. And then another school was in Pittsburgh, was Duquesne. That was the other school I was looking at. And Cornell had quite a lot to offer. If I went there, I'd be going for another route. At one point, I even considered being an engineer. That was back in like middle school, and would have been, a good school to go to as far as Cornell. And a couple of my teammates actually on my high school wrestling team ended up going to Cornell as well. So obviously another reason why I was kind of looking there with guys who wrestled there. Another guy who still wrestles there, Brendan Furman, heavyweight, who we'll see if he gets the start or Fernandez gets to start at heavyweight. That'll be interesting to see. I'm super psyched to see who ends up starting there. But Cornell is the other thing about Cornell, right? So I almost went there. The other thing about Cornell, before we get into the tonight's episode, is that I just watched the Office episode with Dwight impersonating Andy about him going to Cornell. And, do you watch The Office? That's just one of the funniest scenes that I see is whenever Dwight is pretending that he is going to go to Cornell, and then Andy ends up doing the interview for him, the entrance interview, just to kind of get back at him. But every time that I watch that episode with anybody, especially my girlfriend, anytime I watch with her, she always goes, "That is you with Penn State." And maybe you get annoyed by my Penn State fandom too, but that's the truth. I just think it's hilarious. If you haven't seen that episode, like, what are you doing? Go watch The Office. That's one of the best episodes out there. So let's talk about the bout at the ballpark. So the bout at the ballpark is happening. Do you remember the last time that AJ Ferrari stepped onto a baseball field? Yeah, that was just after he won his NCAA championship, and he ripped his shirt after throwing out the first pitch. Well, now AJ Ferrari and the rest of the Oklahoma State team is going back onto a baseball field. Not the same baseball field at Oklahoma State, but they will be wrestling in the bout at the ballpark. Take me out to the ball game, because this is going to be a heck of a duel. Not only is Iowa and Oklahoma State wrestling their dual meet at the Texas Rangers Stadium, the Globe Life Field, but they are also going to be sharing the event with USA versus Iran, a freestyle dual meet. This is unbelievable. This is super exciting news for all college wrestling fans. I just published this article, reposted this onto the Fanco Wrestling website, and tickets are available, and I'll discuss that a little bit. But the coaches, the coaches are excited. The wrestlers are excited. The fans are excited. Tom Brands had this to say: "This is a no-brainer for us. It's Oklahoma State. It's outside the box. It's international, and I know it'll be done right. We need to be ready to go." Tom, they're asking you about the dual meet. They're not asking you about the excitement, right? Not about being ready to go already. It's October. You have a little bit of time. It's not until February. We know you'll be ready to go against Oklahoma State in this immense rivalry. His response just cracked me up. But it's proper because it's exciting that this is happening. Now, how is this event going to run? And there's a bit of controversy behind this. The duels are going to be run simultaneously. So the freestyle duels and the folk style duels will be going on at the same time, but alternating back and forth. So you're going to get a folk style duel, so a match from the Oklahoma State and Iowa duel, and then you'll get a match from the USA versus Iran duel, and it'll just keep going on as that's happening. I was like, I don't know how to feel about it yet. I understand why they're doing it. They want to bring folk style fans to support Team USA, to support freestyle, and of course, any chance to support Team USA. The Patriot in me is, of course, going to support the team, but I think it's great that they're bringing other college wrestling fans into this. This is the first time that this has happened where a college team and an international duel are going on at the same exact time. And it's neat that they're bringing Iran, who is just a powerhouse country in freestyle wrestling, and did pretty well at the World Championships. In fact, one of their world champions from Iran was a heavyweight. And who's one of the heavyweights here in USA that has quite a lot to say as far as matters online? Gable Steveson called out the Iranian world champion. Of course, we know that Gable didn't wrestle the world championships. I mean, he needed a break. There's no denying that. But the Iranian won the world championships, and Gable just straight up called him out on social media, says he wants that match. He wants to wrestle on the ballpark. If this happens, this is going to be an absolutely massive event. I think it's already going to be exciting, but then you bring Gable Steveson into a match that's already featuring two of the most historied programs in college wrestling with Iowa and Oklahoma State, one of the biggest duels out there, including an international duel. Now, including Gable Steveson, this is going to be huge. You can buy tickets now to go to the stadium that's in Texas, or you can watch live on Flow Wrestling. This is going to be, honestly, one of the biggest events of the entire year. Now, let's move on. Let's move on to Cornell. And this is obviously the biggest part of tonight's show, is asking if Cornell's going, asking about Cornell. And before I get on any further, is if you're interested, and I see your comments going on the live show here, if you're interested in supporting the Fanco Wrestling Show, a great way to do that during the live show is actually just with your live chats, by commenting, but also by sending a super chat. And that super chat, whatever amount, whether it's 99 cents, $2, $10, I've even had $100 super chats. It's a great way to help support the Fanco Wrestling channel so you can continue to get free videos like this that I share on the Fanco Wrestling platform. Plus, you even get a little bit of a shout out as far as the comments. So let's talk about the Cornell. Is Cornell going to run away with the EIWA title? Are they truly the number one team in their conference? I'll tell you why they are and why I have them ranked number one, but also why they shouldn't be number one in their conference. So, should they be ranked number one? There are a couple reasons against this right now. And with Cornell coming back to the NCAA this year, of course, it's exciting to speculate and talk and preview about what's going on with the team. So the first reason against them being ranked number one is that they lost their NCAA finalist in Max Dean. And I'm not going to deny that it's a huge loss. It's unfortunate that Dean isn't back. Now, of course, I am excited because he's at Penn State, but it's a big loss for their team. They still have some solid guys stepping in, though, and stepping up to help out the Cornell lineup. So, but sticking with the reasons against. The next reason is that they didn't compete last season. So why should they be at number one? Fanco, why are you ranking Cornell at number one when they didn't even compete last season? Okay, I'll get to it. Lehigh won the EIWA last season. They won the conference last season when Cornell wasn't competing for the fourth season in a row. Okay, that's the third reason why Cornell shouldn't be number one. So why isn't Lehigh number one? Shouldn't they be number one? Yeah, I'm getting your point, okay. They also, Cornell, lost in a duel, the recent duels, to Lehigh and Princeton in 2020. So, yeah, they just lost their duels. The last time they wrestled these guys was in 2020, and they lost to them. So how in the world? Okay, let's just jump into it. So the last time they dueled those teams in the last season that Cornell competed was in 2020. Well, Yanni wasn't wrestling. Vito wasn't wrestling. Max Dean wasn't wrestling. Okay, throw Max Dean out because he's a transfer now. But they all weren't wrestling in the 2022 or in the 2020 season. So it's okay to kind of say that like they didn't have their best lineup forward with a two-time national champ not in their lineup and an All-American not in their lineup. Yeah, they're going to be out a couple points. That's just kind of how the Tides work. Ben Darmstadt's been kind of in and out over the years as well. So, since the All-American in his freshman year. So, like, this is the year that they have their full team forward, and you got to be watching out for them. So, they're number one in the EIWA. One, Yanni and Vito are back, okay? They're back. They're more excited than ever to be back in wrestling. If you follow Yanni, you see that on his social media, how excited he is to be back. It'll be interesting to see that transition from folk style or from freestyle back into folk style. It's been quite some time since they've been on a college wrestling mat, right? They also have 6 wrestlers ranked by Intermat right now in the preseason rankings. All 6 of those guys are in the top 20, so that's impressive in itself. And they have 3 of those guys in the top 8. So Vito, Yanni, and Darmstadt, all in the top 8. Lehigh, and I'll talk about some of the other EIWA teams as well in the conference, is Lehigh has a solid team from top to bottom. They really do. A real stand-up bunch of guys from top to bottom. But they only have one guy in the top 8, and I believe it's either Jordan Wood or Humphreys, but one of those guys is in the top 8. So that's why they're above Lehigh here. The other thing is that as far as like Princeton, that's probably the next best team in line, is that Cornell's lineup, I think, is better than Princeton's, like just in general from head-to-head, and that's kind of how I go about my rankings, the dual rankings, just looking at like the head-to-head matchups. What would the dual meet score be? Who would win, Lehigh or Cornell, as far as each match, 25 all the way up to heavyweight. And same with Princeton. Now, the thing about Princeton is they just have some pretty good head-to-head matchups. Glory versus Vito, as well as Monday and Yapujan. Like, those are some pretty good matchups. And that's kind of why I think Cornell should be number 1. But, are they a lock to win the EIWAs? No. Now, they do have, and this is the exciting part, is they do have a great outlook on the team. You can't base the rankings on the outlook, and I understand that, and I'm not necessarily doing that. They do have a great freshman bunch coming in that I think are going to make just great leaps this season that we're going to see. But are they a lock in the EIWA to win a championship? No, I actually don't think that they're a lock, even with all this excitement. In the 2019 season, so let's look back the past couple years at Cornell's performance at the championships, at the conference championships. In 2019 was when they kind of had their last full lineup, and Cornell that year lost to Lehigh 153 to 139 points. Team points, of course, accumulated throughout the tournament. So they lost by a pretty big margin. Now, Cornell that year had 3 champs in Max Dean, in Chaz Tucker, in Yanni, 3 runners-up, and 8 total placers. So, and I'll get to the point of like why I'm telling you these stats, because it's important to know like why or who all their champs were and who all their placers were. Because the thing is, Lehigh that year had 3 champs. And 2 of them are returning this year with Humphreys and Wood. Of course, Cornell doesn't have a couple of those champs that I just mentioned. They had one guy placed second, and then they had 9 total placers. And a lot of those guys, the reason that they were able to outpace Cornell that year is because of how high they place. Losing in the championship round, but they come back and place in 3rd, huge. Getting bonus points, huge. And that's kind of how Lehigh was able to do that year. Princeton that year placed 3rd, and they had 2 champs. So, which is also insane because between those 3 teams, that's what? In 2019, that was 8 champs. That's impressive. Last year, while Cornell was gone, Lehigh had 4 champs and 5 finalists and outscored their score again. Navy came in second with 129, and then Army. And I think that Navy and Army are going to bring some interesting matchups into the EIWA because with Cornell back and with Navy with new coach and Coach Kolat from last year, really building on this talent, with Army even more hungry than ever to beat Navy, but also get guys onto that podium in EIWAs. I think we're going to see some excitement. So what does Cornell need to do to win? We saw that they had those 3 champs, and they didn't win the EIWA. So what the heck do they need to do to beat Lehigh, the 4-time, the reigning EIWA champions? First of all, there are 2 perspectives to this. 2 parts to this, I should say. The regular season and then the postseason. The regular season, do you think that Cornell can beat Lehigh? And that's my question for you. Is in a duel, do you think Cornell would beat Lehigh? And then in the championships, do you think they would beat Lehigh? So kind of a twofold question. Because I don't necessarily know that they're going to win both. Cornell is going to win the duel and the championships. And the duel is actually at Lehigh. It's in Bethlehem, PA. And that's going to be a tough environment for Cornell to win. It's going to be tough to beat the 4-time EIWA, going for 5-time EIWA champion in Jordan Wood. John Jacobson's not returning, but there are a couple finalists returning to Lehigh, and Jarrett Lane and Malik Hines. So I think the likely scenario, and yes, I do still hold by my decision that Cornell should be ranked number 1 because of the dual matchups, but I don't know that Cornell can outright win both. I think it's a likely scenario that maybe Cornell loses the dual meet to Lehigh, but comes back and wins the EIWA championships, winning for the first time since 2017, getting back on their streak, which they had, I think it was like a 10, 15-year streak at the time, as winning the EIWA championships. Will they run away with the championships? No. Should they be ranked number 1 right now? Yes. And I'm interested to see how it plays out this season. And I see that there's a lot going on in the chat right now, which I like to see. Now, a lot of Ohio State stuff right now. Listen, we're talking about Cornell tonight, not Ohio State. I'm just joking with you guys. Love seeing that in the chat. I love seeing all those. Appreciate the super chat, $10 super chat from Brian. And if, like I said, if you want to get your comments seen, or you want to continue to support the show, a great way to do that is through those super chats. So let's move on to the bold predictions. The bold predictions for the upcoming season with Cornell. Cornell fans are as excited as ever for the return to NCAA wrestling. I mean, Cornell fans are just absolutely psyched. I've been getting messages back and forth, just talk about Cornell, talk about Cornell, talk about Cornell. And I understand why, because we haven't seen like a true amazing Cornell team in a couple years. And now with Yanni back, with Vito back, with Darmstadt back, with all these guys now competing, with all these freshman incomers, like this is going to be such a exciting year for Cornell. So I have 5 bold predictions for you about what I think could happen to Cornell for this upcoming season. The first thing, and I'm going to start off a little bit negative. I know typically I like to keep things as positive as I can, but it's prediction. Might not come true, and I'd love for Cornell fans, come at me if you disagree. Come at me if you disagree. I don't think that Cornell makes the National Duels Finals bracket. So, what are the National Duels Finals brackets? So, the National Duels are happening in December when there are 12 teams that are invited. And these are the 12 teams that I have here listed on this graphic. Arizona State, Central Michigan, Cornell, Hofstra. So, I'm not going to read the whole list, but Penn State, Iowa. It's a tough group of teams. And initially on the first day, the teams are divided into the 4 pools, and then the winners of those pools make a bracket on day 2, a 4-man finals bracket. And here's why I don't think that Cornell will make the finals bracket. Is your top teams in the National Collegiate Duels are Iowa, Penn State, Arizona State, NC State, Mizzou, Virginia Tech, Cornell, I would include in that. But with those teams, do you think Cornell can beat the top 4? I'll tell you now, I don't think they're beating Penn State. And they're not beating Penn State. They're not beating Iowa. They're not. And I don't think they could beat Mizzou either. But they could pull an upset against NC State, Arizona State, Virginia Tech. I think that's very possible to happen. I do think that's very possible to happen. But it'll be close. It'll be a close duel. It'll be like a 15-15 duel. Like the score would be insanely close, and I don't necessarily know that they pull it off. But let's go into some of the positives. So some of the positives, I think Cornell goes undefeated in 2022. Well, Josiah, you just said that they weren't going to win or make the National Collegiate Duels bracket. Okay, 2022. That's 2021. 2021 is in December. 2022 starts anew in January. And after the National Collegiate Duels, the regular season starts. And after the regular season starts, off against Lehigh on January 8th, and then they go into Princeton later in the season. Like, I think it's possible, especially if they get that first dual meet win of the year against Lehigh, I think they plow through the rest of the year and go undefeated, which would be 11 dual meet wins. And yeah, I'm psyched to see what happened. And even if they finish off against Wisconsin, which it will be a tough Big Ten duel, but not an impossible one to win for Cornell. If they go undefeated, 11 straight wins, could be an exciting year. Freshmen, this is my third prediction. So the first one is that Cornell doesn't make the duels bracket. The second one is Cornell goes undefeated. The third one is that I think there are going to be some freshmen that become all-American threats, like complete all-American threats. I think it's absolutely possible that could happen. Now, Greg Diakomahalis posted this photo on Instagram with the caption, 20-year-old freshman. And there are a couple of the freshmen there. And it's true because we haven't seen a lot of the new Cornell guys in the lineup, which because of everything that's happened, you know, like 2019, maybe they were incomers or these guys were just finishing high school. 2020, a lot of the guys took an Olympic red shirt year. And with Cornell also, there's the gray shirt year because they can't take a red shirt because of Ivy League rules. And then there's last year, of course, with the extra year of eligibility. So a lot of and Cornell actually didn't even wrestle last year. So we haven't seen a lot of these freshmen. But what people are forgetting is that Cornell had a top 5 ranked recruiting class of 2020 by Flow Wrestling. Match that with a couple of the recent other classes where guys either took a gray shirt and wrestled that year or just we haven't even seen them on the map, but they were tough. And there's a lot to be excited about with Cornell. Now, technically, like Foca and Fernandez and Saunders, those guys aren't freshmen. They're sophomores. But there's a lot to be intrigued about. In the class of 2020 with Greg Diakomahalis, which, yes, that's Yanni's younger brother, Josh Saunders, Cole Hanlovic. Greg was actually a 5-time New York State champion, top 40 in the class of 2020. And actually, what was interesting is there are only, I want to say 4, maybe 5-time New York State champions. 2 of them are in the NCAA now, with Corey Teamer and Greg Diakomahalis. So that's going to be a lot of fun watching Greg jump in there with his brother Yanni, making an impact in college wrestling for Cornell. Josh Saunders out of Missouri, top 10 in the class of 2020, and he's a guy who a lot of people have considered to be title threat coming into his freshman year. Now, to be honest, there aren't many people I would consider a title threat. I've just seen these message board forums, other ranking saying he could be a title threat one day. Maybe that happens. As a freshman, it's pretty tough. Spencer Lee, yeah, I did consider him a title threat his freshman year. Gable Stevenson, even though he wasn't then as good as he is now, he was a title threat. Yanni, yeah, he was somebody coming in as an exciting guy to watch, title threat. Cole Hanlovic out of Bethlehem, or out of Becca, PA. Julian Ramirez, the Florida State champion, actually had a pretty good gray shirt year. He was 23-6 in that gray shirt year. Chris Foca out of New Jersey. So let's talk about some of these New Jersey guys coming into Cornell, taking over the scene. Already top 15 by Intermat. And that's because he had a pretty good gray shirt year. He had a pretty good freshman year. When he was 21-3, his only losses coming to a couple of All-Americans, and Bullard of NC State, Starachi of Penn State, and then Neil Richards, who out of VMI was potentially an All-American threat had he been able to finish the 2020 season. And out of Bergen Catholic, the New Jersey State champ, I think will be somebody to watch and is another one of these threats for Cornell as a freshman. And he's already a top 15 threat. Luis Fernandez of New Jersey, another New Jersey State champion, also had a pretty good redshirt year, or gray shirt year, 26-4 with wins over Harvard's heavyweight Slavkowski. I can never pronounce his name right, but he did have that loss to Kirkfleet. But still, it was a decision loss, and I think that with these guys, they can be serious All-American threats, at least a couple of them. So what's my fourth prediction for Cornell? I think Yanni bonuses away to the NCAA championships. I think he bonuses away through the tournament. He hasn't been known for, or not through the tournament, excuse me, to the tournament, okay? Yanni hasn't been known for as much as Spencer Lee and Gable Stevenson as far as like bonusing his way through the NCAA season, okay? So he hasn't necessarily been known as much as they have, but he's still like, I mean, have you seen Yanni wrestle? Like, he could score some points. Have you seen him step onto the mat? No, you haven't seen him in college wrestling in over 900 days. That's the last time he stepped on a college wrestling mat. But still, I think that he has the potential to actually bonus his way to NCAAs. And if he does bonus his way through the tournament or to the tournament, he'll be a Hodge Trophy contender. I mean, he will be anyways with the potential third national title on the way. But I think what we're going to see out of Yanni this year is, unfortunately, he didn't accomplish his goals that he wanted to over the past couple of years. And like, I don't want to speak out of turn or speak for him, but he didn't win the Olympic gold medal. He didn't make the Olympic team. He didn't win a world championship. He didn't get to where he wanted, when we know that these are his goals. Like, he's stated these. He's talked about them. That's what he wants to do. That's where he believes he is, and I believe that he is on that level. But I think you're going to see Yanni come back and approach college wrestling with a whole new approach, because he's thinking on an international level, right? Like guys like Spencer Lee, Gable Stevenson, they're thinking on the international level. And I think when they come back and you know, party with the college kids, like it's a whole different guy that we're going to see. His toughest matches we're going to see are probably going to be at the National Collegiate Duels, like before NCAAs, I'm talking, like in December, so early on in the season, when he could, not will, but could wrestle Tariq Wilson, Max Murin, Bryce Andonian, Brock Mahler, all at the National Collegiate Duels. It's possible that he wrestles those guys. And I don't necessarily know that he can bonus them. So we'll see what happens. Well, maybe he can. Maybe we'll see. So the next prediction I have for Cornell is that they finish the season with 4 All-Americans. Yanni, I think, is a lock. Vito, right here in this graphic, I think he's a lock. Ben Darmstadt, who I haven't even mentioned yet, the other All-American from Cornell already, who is an All-American in his freshman year, plays 6th. I think he's also a guy who's locked in. And the 4th person remains. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Chris Foca? Is it going to be Greg Giacomo-Hollis? Is he going to step in and do something big and exciting? Could it be Josh Saunders? Who's that 4th guy going to be for Cornell? And my bonus, kind of like, I give you my 5 prediction, but my bonus is I actually think that Cornell can have 2 finalists this year between a couple of those guys. Yeah, I think Yanni's kind of locked in, but it's possible that Vito gets in the finals or Darmstadt. Like, I really do think that Cornell can be that exciting top 5 contending national team with all these All-Americans. And my biggest prediction for the upcoming year, to be honest with you, like, my biggest prediction for this upcoming year is that it's going to be one heck of a comeback year for Cornell, and fans are going to be psyched. So the next topic, and before I get into that, I'm going to actually take a sip of my sparkling ice because my mouth is getting dry. And thank you for that super chat, Falcon the Wrestler. Appreciate you supporting the Fanco Wrestling Show, and he says Cornell is going to be fire this year. I couldn't agree more. I think they are going to be fire this year. They're going to be a fun team to watch. And are they like an overrated team? Are they an underrated team? And before I get into this next segment, like, I really question whether I should do this because I like to keep things positive. But let me give you an explanation about the highly underrated and overrated college wrestling team. So I actually went through Win Magazine. Excuse me, sorry. Let me get back a second here. So I actually went through Win Magazine's rankings, compared them to my own, and decided who were the highly overrated and underrated college wrestling teams. I had a few disagreements with Win Magazine. I did. I had a few disagreements also with Intermat's rankings. So, and you'll see my full rankings for pound in my upcoming season preview guide, which you're going to want to, like, just have that on your radar. The Fanco season preview guide, you're going to want to hear about that. But let's talk about these overrated and underrated teams. And before I mention that, I do want to say that saying overrated, like, it can seem like a negative thing to say. By that, all I mean is, like, another ranking source has them higher than I have them ranked. So nothing against the team as far as, like, personally. So the first team, Cornell, overrated or underrated? To be honest with you, I think Cornell is underrated. I think that there's a lot of hype behind them, so maybe they're right where the fans think they should be. But Win Magazine has them ranked at number 14. I have them ranked at number 6 right now. That's a huge difference. Huge difference. So, yeah, I do think that they are, in fact, underrated. They lost Max Dean. Okay, I get it. But they still have Yanni and Vito, and Yanni is driving a lot of that excitement forward. They're serious point scorers. And I think it's potential that they get a couple guys into the finals, as well as All-Americans, but I do think that they're a bit underrated. They had top 5 recruiting class in 2020 with a lot of those freshmen coming in, and I get it, you can't put those guys in the rankings just yet, a lot of them, but I do think that they're kind of being overlooked, or a couple of their freshmen are being overlooked a little bit with the unknowns, but I still think that they can be threats. Michigan is the next team that I have to talk about because, are you serious, Win Magazine? This isn't a slight to Win Magazine either, by the way. I love Win Magazine. I'm subscribed to them, to their service. I just like kind of arguing about rankings a bit. Michigan, they had ranked at number 10. I had ranked at number 4. Underrated is Michigan. Number 10? Really? This is one of the toughest lineups, not only in the Big Ten, but one of the toughest lineups in the entire country. It really is. Yeah, they're losing Massa, and that was kind of a newer development that we've seen, is that Massa will not be returning this year. Just had a kid, I don't blame him. But they're still stacked from top to bottom, even without him. They have All-American threats, title threats. I mean, All-American threats with Mason Paris, with Pat Bruckey, with the Amines, with Micic coming back. That's an incredible lineup. Number 10, not quite. They're a threat. They're a serious threat. The next team, Minnesota. Overrated or underrated? And I do want to hear, like, if you think a team is overrated or underrated. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. Minnesota. They're, like, right around where I think they should be, but generally, I actually think that Minnesota is a bit overrated. Here's why. Don't yell at me, okay? Because Gable is the face of Minnesota wrestling, right? He's really kind of seen his face at NCAA, but really Minnesota wrestling. And because Gable is so great at marketing himself, marketing his team, where he can come from, like, getting guys to come to Minnesota, like, Gable's great at getting the hype levels up for the Gophers. But can the lineup back it up? I think so to some extent, but I think in perception they're overrated. I do still think that they're on the fence of a top 10 team. They have a good squad. They're in the middle of my Big Ten rankings. So, like, yeah, I think they're tough. Overrated just on perception. And if you're wondering about my rankings, like, Okay, Josiah, what's up with these Fanco Wrestling rankings? Where are you getting these from? Well, this segment is actually brought to you by the Fanco Wrestling rankings. And if you're wondering who the top teams are in each conference, in the Big 10, in ACC, in Big 12, if you're wondering how I rank all those teams, you can check those out in my rankings. Like, especially if you don't want to pay for the other sites. I know there are a lot of other sites out there, a lot of other sources that do the rankings, but I got to pay for the rankings. I'm giving my rankings away for free. I'll tell you right now, I have Iowa's number 1 in the Big 10, but where do Penn State and Michigan rank? And what about, like, Rutgers? Well, you can find out all about that, as well as the other teams in the ACC and the Big 10 or Big 12, all those other conferences. You can check that out down in the description below. Free download. All that I ask is for your email and name. That's it. Other than that, you can get these free rankings. It's something that can be excited. You can enjoy for the preseason. The next team here, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, are they overrated or underrated? Well, Win Magazine has them at number 7, which is right around where I think they should be. I have them at 9. Internet has them at 16. Underrated, man. 16? Way too low. Way too low. With Latona, Myers, Indonian, Mekhi Lewis, who was a national champion, not last year, but still was a national champion, coming back into the lineup. And they're adding Nathan Traxler from Stanford coming to as heavyweight to Virginia Tech. Man, this team is just getting massive appeal in the last year. And I keep getting more enthralled by how good their lineup is. They keep adding more guys that are just like all-American threats. It's possible that they put a guy in the finals this year. I thought they were going to do it with Mekhi and Latona last year. I did. To say that they're like bottom tier, like 16 to 20, no way. Underrated. What about the rivals, NC State? This is a fun one. Are they overrated or underrated? Honestly, I think they're right around where they should be. So I would tinker on underrated, but right around where they should be. The perception is that Virginia Tech is the dominant team. But with their lineup shifts that they've had, I think that a lot of people are kind of forgetting that and discounting that. But Hiley's a real threat at 174. And with him and his brother back-to-back at 74 and 84 training in the room now together, I think that that's something that is overlooked, as well as Tariq, who's moving up. He's back. He's on fire. He's better than ever. Jacob Camacho, I thought, was a dark horse last year, and is still a top pick of mine again to become an All-American. A bit underrated is NC State. And you call it bias, you call it what you want to, but I think that that's the case. Wisconsin, overrated, underrated. I believe 4 or 5 more teams I want to really get into this, because like obviously like Iowa and Penn State, they're right where they should be. Like I don't think either of them are overrated or underrated. But Wisconsin, who Win Magazine has at number 25, Intermat has in the mid 20s, I would have Wisconsin at like number 18. So I think they're actually underrated because of their transfers with Austin Gomez, Andrew McNally. I believe both of them were blood round guys in the past. And the blood round guys teams that have those blood round guys are really the teams to look out for, because you get a couple of those guys in there to the blood round at NCAA, they start adding serious points onto their team. We haven't seen Gomez in a couple years, right? We haven't seen him compete in a couple years. So I think he's going to be a surprise to most people. And now at Wisconsin, after training for a couple years, I think they're underrated. Rutgers, number 9, Rutgers. Overrated or underrated? Come at me, Jersey guys. They're overrated. Okay? They're overrated as a top 10 team. So let me put that out there. Overrated as a top 10 team. I don't think they should be top 10. I have them at like number 14. They don't have a lot of holes in their lineup, and with Sebastian Rivera come back, they're All-Americans, Turley, Poznansky, adding Greg Bozak, transfer out of Clarion. I think it's good for them. They're going to have a good lineup. and I'm not denying their skill, right? I'm just denying the fact that I don't think they're quite in that top 10 tier yet. I don't. We'll see how good they are in the first couple weeks of the season. They have quads, the Garden State Grapple. They're going to have 8 duels in the first month of the season. That's insane. That's really insane. What about Nebraska, another Big Ten team? Nebraska, I think, is underrated. They are number 22 by Win Magazine, number 16 by me. I think they're overseen because of how good the Big Ten is. And I think it's been like this for the last couple of years, honestly. They're overpowered, overshadowed by Iowa, Penn State, and even Michigan. Like, Nebraska is a tough team. I think I said it last year, I still think they can put a guy in the finals. Whether with Venge, with Schultz, with Lovett. I mean, Lovett, that was one of my favorite storylines at last year's Big Ten championships when he made the finals. And they showed that these guys all, while they're like ranked in, I think between like 11 and 20 now by Intermat, they've shown in the past that they have potential to win big matches. And I think they will continue. What about Cal Poly? Overrated. Here's why. Win has them number 17. I don't have them ranked in my top 20. I'm excited for Cal Poly. Like, on the surface, I'm excited. They have Evan Wick transferring in. His brother's there. Bernie Truout is coming back, who was a real gift at last year's national tournament. Nobody really expected him to do anything. Ended up making the semis last year. And he's back in the lineup again, but up a weight. But my question is, who are their other title threats? Do they have other All-American title threats? I don't necessarily know that they do. I'm not even sure how they'll do in the Pac-12, let alone the NCAA championships against these other teams, whether in duels or the actual NCAA championships. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but I just think they're a bit overrated. I think that prove me wrong. Like, with all these teams, prove me wrong if you think I'm crazy. Lehigh, underrated. Yeah, I put the graphic up before. Underrated. Number 21, Lehigh. I have them right around the same thing, but I think they are also being overshadowed by Cornell. They're overshadowing them just because of their return. Lehigh is the 4-time reigning EIWA champions. Cornell is not. They've won the last 4 years. The returning All-Americans, Jordan Woods and Josh Humphreys, back after an injury. I think that they're being overseen, overlooked. They're going to compete with Cornell in the dual and the EIWA title. We could see some upsets maybe from Lehigh against Pitt. We've kind of seen it in the past. That's why I think they're overrated. But my question really is, do you think that Lehigh and these other teams are overrated or underrated? I know that there's going to be a lot of controversy about this, and I love to see that coming along. So I see a couple comments here in the down in the comments section about Ohio State. I know being asked about that. So Win Magazine, and I'm pulling this up right now, has Ohio State ranked at number 7, actually. So Ohio State's tied for number 7 with Minnesota. So honestly, I don't think they're overrated or underrated. I think they're right around where they should be. I would lean on underrated just because they didn't have a phenomenal year last year, and I think they're bringing back a lot of talent. We've seen, unfortunately, a lot of things, a lot of guys fleeing out of Ohio State, not for any bad reason, but Kyle Snyder was the first big one to leave, kind of. NATO left, what's going on with their RTC. But I still think that there's a lot to be excited about with Etchemendia, who's somebody who excites me. Lightweights, I think that Ohio State, it was Sasso obviously coming back. The next question I saw here in the comments is from Nolan Saunders. Is this recorded? It actually is recorded, and you can check out the full audio version after this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I released that as soon as this is over, so you can start watching it. But that'll lead me into And thank you for the audio listeners for continuing to support the show on audio, on Apple, on Spotify. Let's discuss the Iowa Hawkeyes. Everybody's favorite topic, the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm going to tell you 5 storylines to follow with the Iowa Hawkeyes this season. Everyone likes talking about Iowa. It's always fun to discuss them. But I want to tell you 5 storylines that you should really be following for them this season. The first one, Spencer Lee seeking his 4th title. And this is the obvious one. This is the one that's right out there. Spencer Lee seeking his 4th title is huge, first and foremost, right? He would be the first ever 4-timer from Iowa. Who are the other 4-timers? Kyle Dake, Cale Sanderson, Pat Smith, Logan Stieber. You may know a couple of those names because they're pretty big in the wrestling world, right? They're the only 4-time NCAA champions. Spencer Lee could be another one. Add it into that mix. Can he dominate by bonus points? I think that's just an interesting little Spencer Lee storyline to follow. Can he dominate the entire season by bonus? He did last year up until the finals when he won 7-zip. So close. So close. And he shared the Hodge Trophy with Gable Steveson. I think that we'll see. With newcomers into that 125-pound spot, with Pat Glory, with Vito, with Brandon Courtney coming back, Spencer Lee's going to get some competition, but we'll see how much of it he actually has. The second thing that I got to talk about is, second storyline, Anthony Cassiope. Is his wrestling going to change now that he literally looks like Hercules? I mean, have you seen Cassiope these days? This photo that I'm sharing here on the live show is shared by Pat Minio on Twitter and has been circling around the wrestling world. Oh my gosh, this man looks like a Greek god compared to where he was last year. I mean, like, I don't want to jump on him, but he was looking like a heavyweight, your typical kind of heavyweight. His wrestling was okay, I mean, he got the job done, right? He wasn't like necessarily that exciting. It wasn't like a Gable Steveson or a Mason Paris. But he got the job done. He's finally looking like a grown man now. And I'm afraid for anybody in his path this year. I do question, is he able to overtake a Mason Paris this year? Yeah, he was pinned by him last year. He hasn't been able to beat Mason Paris, hasn't been able to beat Gable Steveson. And those are actually a couple of his only college losses in the last 2 years of those two guys. Can he pull a move off like Adam Kuhn back in the 2018 duel against Kyle Snyder, where he pulled off a crazy upset win? Is that possible that he can do something now that he's looking like a beast? The third storyline that you should be following is, can Austin DeSanto reach the top of the stand? Is it possible that DeSanto gets to become an NCAA champion? I mean, he has battled, put his heart on the line against these NCAA champs, and has beat RBY in the past. Hasn't been able to beat him in the last couple of years, but DeSanto is somebody who he finished 3rd at nationals last year. His only losses were to Fix and RBY throughout the whole year. He always has those close matches, and he's somebody who just always is grinding it out. I love watching him wrestle because he's your typical Iowa lightweight. He is. He runs his mouth a little bit on and off the mat, not on social media or anything. He's off that, but I love hearing him in interviews just because of what's he going to say next? And he can back it up. Is he going to be able to finally reach his goal of getting to the top of the stand? He's done it in his high school years when he made that huge leap in his senior year, beat Spencer Lee in the finals. Yeah, I know he had the ACL problem. All right. Is it possible that he could get to the top of the stand? It's not and this is the thing this season, right, is that we could see DeSanto with the National Collegiate Duels, with the regular dual meet, with the Big Tens, with the NCAAs. We could literally see Austin DeSanto wrestle RBY 3 or 4 times. We can see him wrestle Dayton Fix 2 or 3 times. And that's not even mentioning the tournaments that they may be going to and meeting up. It's not easy to beat the same opponent that many times, let alone in the same season. Just saying. 4th storyline to follow, Alex Marinelli. can Alex Marinelli redeem himself? I just did a video discussing if he has a lot to prove this season, and he does. Because why? Well, Marinelli's entered the NCAA championships seeded as the number 1 seed on 3 separate occasions, but his highest placing he's ever got is 6. This is a fact that just blows my mind. It really does, because how is the bull, this guy that is, he really is that good. Like, I truly believe it. He unfortunately chokes on the big stage. We've seen it in the past, like on multiple occasions, where he loses in the quarters, losing the semis, and just can't quite bounce back. Now, the guys he's losing to are top caliber. Isaiah Martinez, Mekhi Lewis, Shane Griffith, right? Like, these are national champions that he's losing to, but still can't quite jump back in the consies. Can he redeem himself and actually make the finals this year? If he makes the finals, there's going to be massive points for Iowa that they didn't have last year. Think about that. Marinelli hardly scored any points at nationals for Iowa last year. If he comes back and makes the finals, or at least All-Americans, that's huge points added to the board. And that could literally be 4 or 5 finalists for Iowa. It's his final season. I think he can help his team out. The 5th storyline that you need to be following about Iowa this year is, can the Hawkeyes uphold their winning streak? So the Iowa Hawkeyes have a winning streak right now of 18 wins in a row. Their last loss was in 2019 to Oklahoma State, and they've just been obviously on a dominant winning spree since then. They're going to have some tough duels, and entering the National Collegiate Duels this year, it's not going to be an easy task to win that with Penn State, with everybody else that's there. If they do go, let's say they do go undefeated this year, though, that'll be 35 straight wins in a row. 17-0 season that they could potentially have this season. I love watching these streaks happen. We'll see if they can reach that Penn State tier that was from a couple years ago that was broken by Arizona State. If not, it would have been broken by the Iowa Hawkeyes. But with Penn State on their schedule, with Oklahoma State on their schedule, can they actually keep this streak going? What storyline are you most intrigued to watch about the Iowa Hawkeyes this season? And my friends, my wrestling fans, that's going to do it for this week's Fanco Wrestling Show. But I do want to remind you that the NCAA the season preview guide will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And oh boy, let me tell you, there is some exciting content coming up in that you're going to want to get your hands on one of those season preview guides, because I've been just putting it together. And if you're at this point in the show and you're listening, like, this is inside scoop that nobody has yet. Putting on stats on the top 25 teams. I'm putting on stats on some of the incoming freshmen, some of the transfers in the offseason. Like, intense stats that you are going to want to know and going to want to be a part of and understanding before the season gets here. But I appreciate everybody in the chat tonight, everybody dropping those super chats. Thank you so much for your support and following along. And if you're listening on audio, appreciate you leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. My name's Josiah. This is the Fanco Wrestling Show.